Welcome to the SPRT Therapy Podcast, where top doctors, trainers, and athletes share their secrets to moving better, recovering better, and performing better.
I'm going to tell you right now, if it wasn't for Tim Brown, I would have never walked again or surfed.
Come a little bit closer, hear what I have to say.
Please join hosts Dr. Tim Brown and Dr. John Pecora for today's conversation.
Welcome to the SPRT Therapy Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm Dr. Tim Brown.
And I'm Dr. Trent Nessler.
And I'm Dr. John Pecora. We're excited to have 2025 SPRT Therapy Sports Symposium, Sports Movement Symposium speaker, Dr. Trent Nessler, ACL expert, legend, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu master, the guy that puts them all back together. We've known each other, for the three of us, for a long time, going back to, we were doing some work with Dr. Kevin Wilk and Dr. James Andrews out in Birmingham, Alabama. And we were meeting with Kevin, and you were the regional vice president of physiotherapy and associates, which is a really prestigious role. I mean, you guys had 700, 800 facilities at that point?
Yeah, 700 nationwide. And I think in my region it was around 75.
Yeah, that's great. And from there, at that time, you were already an ACL expert. I think you went down the rabbit hole after that point and did a deep dive in the research. You became a part of a lot of the research. You were on the road for a lot of years, traveling around the world, educating people on how to prevent ACL injuries, how to rehab from ACL injuries, the mechanism, the research around what we kind of know now. But maybe you could just kind of give us a little background. You were a competitive bodybuilder. Once again, you're a DPT. Maybe tell us a little bit about, or elaborate on your background, on your trajectory and your path, how you kind of went from, being a younger athlete, even getting into the sports physical therapy profession, but then how that kind of went, in the route of, really focusing on, being one of the leaders in the world on ACL information.
Sure. And first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. I started working out. I was telling somebody this the other day. It has been over 4.5 decades that I've been weight training. I first started when I was 10 years old. I actually started competing in bodybuilding in junior high, and started wrestling in junior high, wrestled all the way through high school. At the same time, I was also doing weightlifting, more powerlifting competitions, but also bodybuilding competitions. In high school, I actually competed at the national level for bodybuilding. Went on to college, and I really, I enjoyed fitness, wanted to get something kind of in that track of fitness. And my father's a quadriplegic, broke his neck when I was 10 years old. It was a very traumatic experience at 10 years old, but also a very formative experience. Really taught me the impact that physical therapy can have on not only just the patient's life, but really the life of the family. So really we started to go the PT route, and actually continued to compete in bodybuilding through college. My last show, I actually competed in my last national show. I had just turned 30 years old, was competing on a national. It was a pro qualifier, and I was out of Arizona, and I did that while I was doing my last intern for PT school. So I've always been into fitness, and it's really kind of driven my approach. I tend to be a little bit more on the aggressive side, I would say, when you look at traditional physical therapy, in kind of some of the approaches that I do. And I also tend to be very exercise oriented. I do a lot of manual work, but I also tend to be very movement based in my focus. Got introduced to ACL injuries early on in my practice. I was literally in practice maybe 6 months before I started treating ACLs. and very quickly became to realize I was not doing things good enough. As I was discharging these athletes and I was watching them walk, I was seeing certain movement patterns I knew intuitively was bad for them. And in a quest to get answers, I went back to do a doctorate at that time, where a doctorate, it was just at the beginning. Actually, it was the second college to do the DPT. It was Northern Arizona University, and I was fortunate enough that I was able to tailor it to what I wanted to do, which the DPT for me at that time was much more intensive than what it is today for those that are transitioning. I did 72 credit hours. It took me 3 years. I would practice Monday through Friday, leave Friday afternoon, drive up to the university, go to school Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, drive back and treat patients. Did that for 3 years. But it was also one of the most formative things because being early on, I was really able to tailor it towards motor learning, towards biomechanics. Part of my dissertation was developing a core stabilization program for Seattle Mariners, which they used for, almost 12, 15 years as a part of their spring training that they did. So it was a very formative piece for me, and really kind of led me into where I'm at today, in the work that we're doing on ACLs. I've been very blessed in my career. I started practice in Arizona. I got recruited to Nashville, Tennessee, to work with Baptist Sports Medicine, which at that time in this region was very, very large. Got recruited from there to go to Andrews. I was there until, about 5 or 6 years ago, and then went on to work with police and fire, doing the same things that I've been doing in sports, and now doing that out of the athlete lab in Franklin, and just having a blast, loving it.
Yeah,
25 years in, I still love what I do.
That's magic right there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and more every day, right?
Right, absolutely. And it's amazing to me, as you guys know, I mean, a major population that I work with is mixed martial arts. And working in that population is really kind of, one, it's forced me to be more aggressive, to get a better outcome in a much shorter period of time. And it's introduced me to things that traditionally I had not been introduced to, like peptides. We do a lot of work with peptides here as a part of the rehab process, and just how you leverage all of that to maximize outcomes, red light beds, cold plunges, BFR, all that stuff. So it's been a, I called it the athlete lab for a reason. That's because we are involved in research, but it's such a learning. I'm just learning so much, even 25 years in, I'm still just learning a ton.
I've noted that your patients really recognize enthusiasm, and they recognize how, especially high-level athletes, you're either into it or you're doing it by a cookbook. And
sure.
when an athlete can come around a doctor that's doing their best to live the same things that they teach, it's inspirational to them, and they look up to it. You're speaking to, like, you're working with a lot of mixed martial arts. How important is that you can speak their same language?
For sure.
That you
sure.
know their movements, and that you've experienced some of the aches and pains that they've experienced. For
sure.
me, I know that's it's a giant comfort for the patients to know that you've kind of lived a similar lifestyle and have suffered the same.
Yeah, for sure. And for them to know that, 3 days a week I'm on the mats, I'm still putting it out there, even as, my mature age, I'm still out there, and I'm still rolling, and I'm still going after it. And I had one of my athletes the other day tell me like how much that meant to him. Like, I actually know what I'm talking about and know what I'm doing, because, especially for these athletes, and it's a lot of people are not used to some of the things that we get into.
Yeah, I'm sure. So that takes a bunch of confidence on their part. But again, I think knowing that you have walked the walk and you are talking the same talk that it took to get to the point where you're at right now, I mean, again, a tremendous boost. And I know when I spoke with the Rotolo brothers,
Yeah.
when Cade had his knee injury most recently, I mean, they were just that like this guy's a black belt in
Yeah.
BJJ, and I just said, yeah, you're going to be able to, you're going to be kind of talking to Amir, but Amir that's had a different experience than you and a lot more
For sure.
experience than you on the injury side. So they were really enthusiastic, and that really broke down walls. I know when we were talking together and working together with them. So
For
thank you for
sure.
that.
Yeah, and for me as a clinician, I love working with athletes. For me as a jiu-jitsu athlete, to work with Cade Rentola, I mean, that's a pinnacle, and he's at the top of his game. And to be able to help an athlete who's at the top of his game, ADCC champion, Craig Jones Invitational champion, to be able to help him, navigate through, especially that first part of the ACL. It's such a scary time.
Oh yeah.
You have so many emotions going through your body, and just thoughts about, am I ever going to be back to what I was before? And,
Yeah,
it's
talk about
comforting.
disconnecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disconnecting your subsystems, right? I mean, not only
Yeah.
with the injury, but then your body doesn't know it's going through surgery. So
Yeah.
everything's being disconnected. And for you to be able to plot a graph that allows them early recovery or a chance at getting that back as soon as possible, because as an athlete, I know I've had an ACL reconstruction, and it's an out of body experience,
Yeah,
not
for
only
sure.
when you get the injury, but when you're done with surgery. It's like you completely like different parts. It's not even
Yeah.
a part of your body. So bringing that back into those subsystems and allowing the nervous system to reconnect to that injured area is massive. And I know that's what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's tremendous to be able to speak, like Tim, like you always say, speak their language and have them know that you're coming from a place where you truly understand, what they've gone through, what they're going through, what they need. You can see into the future as far as the potential challenges that may arise
Mm-hmm.
based on what they're dealing with or what you see. And yeah, so it's extremely important. And it's a great differentiator, right, for you and your community as far as, being able to serve that demographic, for them to know that you're a part of that community is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
athletes treating athletes. I mean,
Yeah,
it
for
doesn't
sure.
it doesn't have to happen, but I think there's just, for me at least, my perspective. I'm wholly biased here, but
Yeah, for sure.
that's been the key to opening the door to many of the people I've worked with.
For sure.
So let's go back real quick, just because once again you've got a really impressive background, and it's really interesting how it's helped to kind of influence where you're at and what you do. You kind of skipped over the fact that NAU, which is a great school up in Flagstaff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you're so close to spring training and all the spring training facilities, is that where the Seattle Mariners? I mean, because to be
Yeah.
6 months in,
Mm-hmm.
to your DPT and be designing a program like that for an elite, major league level, baseball program. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I guess I failed to mention that I used to work with them. So I had actually opened a new clinic. I was looking for space, and I had started to do some work during spring training. We covered the Seattle Mariners, the Padres, Milwaukee Brewers. They were all in the Peoria, Arizona area, and that's where my clinic was.
And if people aren't familiar with spring training, I mean, Cactus League, it's
huge.
Phoenix, Scottsdale, Peoria, Glendale, all of the basically West Coast. There's the East Coast teams that do the what is the Grapefruit League down in Florida, and then all the Midwest to West Coast teams are all in that area, and so you've got all of the teams, and then not to mention that it's not just for spring training. That's where their AA, AAA facilities, the rehab, when they go on rehab,
that's where they went.
Stints, that's where they go. So you're
that's
in the
where they
hotbed
went.
Of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and so I actually put my clinic directly across the street from Seattle Mariners for that purpose, because they it just brought a lot of people to the area. During spring training, hotel rooms were sold out. And two is that I knew that they needed a PT locally who understood baseball, who understood shoulder injuries. I worked with a lot of pitchers and catchers. That was kind of my thing at that time. Despite the fact that I am focused on ACL now, I actually, when I first started out, I primarily did shoulder. Did a lot of pitchers and catchers. We did their physicals. So we did pitchers and catchers physicals. And then anytime one of their players got hurt, I actually opened my clinic at 5 a.m. And we would start seeing players at 5 a.m. because they would get on the field usually by 7 a.m. And most other clinics in town weren't even open. So we'd open at 5 just so that we could see an influx of baseball players before they actually went out and started doing practice. So I was very fortunate to have that exposure very early on. And so when I actually used to do Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd go into the athletic training room there and spend some time with the head athletic trainer and the physician that was with the team at that time. And so part of that we started discussing was I was seeing a lot of their players with back injuries. And so I was doing a in-depth, deep dissection with Carl DeRosa. So Carl DeRosa, at that time, he was on the editorial board for Spine. He had written multiple textbooks on mechanical low back pain. Just in the PT world, he was like the spine guy. And so I got to spend an entire semester, just he and I, dissecting out lumbar spine. And then really getting into the mechanics of how, things pull across the thoracolumbar fascia and how all those things work together. And got to see it hands-on, actually dissect it out. And then we developed an exercise program to help to improve improve that entire system. And it was, so I was trying to address a problem that the Mariners had at the time, low back pain, mostly in pitchers and catchers, and really kind of created a program that was a progressive program to help them progress through that during spring training.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's great.
You were into fascia pretty early, then relative to the trend that it is today, especially that thoracolumbar fascia to store energy
100%.
and be able to create elasticity.
100%, Nate. And even to this day, I still draw the diagrams that I used to draw back then about how force couples across the system, and you get an imbalance of those force couples, and that's where problems start showing up.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
in pitchers and catchers, it's pretty common because they're such a one-sided sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we could do the 4-hour Joe Rogan podcast and keep going on that.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll revisit that because that would be a really interesting conversation with regards to what you found. And then when you discover or expose to, conditions, concepts, areas like that early on in your career, and then those progress, it's amazing how you come back around to, really kind of better understanding the patterns that you were seeing at that point, which, we always probably think that we know a lot about at that point. And then we realize 10, 15 years later, number one, we were probably really on to some of the right stuff. But number two, I had no idea what I was really getting into or where it would progress from there. So
for sure.
So then you talk about getting recruited from there. And obviously extensive background. Now you're expert in shoulder, back, ACL, working with, MLB teams, and then kind of talk about getting recruited, because you left out the fact that, you were with Physiotherapy and Associates. Yep. They were then acquired by Select.
Yep.
And then you were brought on to be the VP, the director, the senior director of sports medicine for the entire organization. At that point, you're 900 plus facilities? 1,800. 1,800.
Yeah.
1,800. So you're the director of sports medicine for all of those physical therapy facilities.
Yeah. So very interesting part of the career. I originally came to Nashville. I left physio and had joined Ascension Health, which owns Baptist Sports Medicine. So we covered the Titans, the Predators. We had 50 some odd schools here. We had a very large sports medicine program, and I was starting to really launch some of my initial ACL research, looking at human movement. We did a couple of big projects because we did physicals. We had access to large numbers. And that's really where I started to implement some of the initial research with physicals to get some of that information. And then I got recruited to go to Birmingham to work with Dr. Andrews and that group. And at that time, it was still owned by Physio. And so at that time, I was head of sports medicine for Physio. And then that got acquired by Select Medical, which, you went from a 600 clinic organization to an 1,800 clinic organization to, a $5 billion company. It was a big change. I'll never forget, John, sitting there the very first day in this long conference room, this long conference table with select executives all lined up around it, and me doing a presentation on what I do and why my job's important. And apparently I convinced them enough that they brought me on as their director of sports medicine innovation. So, the cool part is that I got to do all the things that I was doing from a research perspective and develop programs that we would then implement enterprise-wide,
Wow.
which was an amazing process for me, because it was about taking the science and the research and developing programming and programs around that, and then creating a business model around that, a way to
Wow.
financially create a return on investment, and then implement that into a region to test it out, and then use that to then spread that enterprise wide. So it was a lot of fun. I got
Wow.
to meet some amazing people. At Select, we covered, I want to say it was just over 400 sports teams, and that included pro, college, and high school. So it was a large girth which to have access to. And the cool thing is that one of the things I've always wanted to do in my career is have a positive influence on my profession. And so, I'm also the harshest critic of my profession. So to be able to create programs that I know actually work and drive better outcomes, to be able to push those into the organization, that was really cool. It
Yeah,
just gave me an avenue to do what I was brought on earth to do.
I mean, that's the holy grail, being able
Right.
to have a problem, do the science to solve it, find out what's most evidence-based, and develop programs around that
Yeah,
directly, and keep it in a silo, so to speak, for
for
your
sure.
people. God, that's a great concept and a great model.
And today, what I would say is here at the Athlete Lab is that I've been able to multiply that by tenfold.
Wow.
And part of it is because of, all of the data that we now have so stepping back, I mean, it's funny because I was at this big corporation, and one of the things I was presenting on was the AMI. And at that time, it was still really much in its infancy stage. I had tried to develop it with dartfish. For those that are familiar with dartfish, tried to originally develop it with dartfish. Then I went from dartfish to the Connect, and then was introduced to Dorsa V, who helped me bring the commercial product to the market. And so, it was right around that time that I was getting ready to launch this commercial product, and I was working for a major corporation. So fortunately, I'd let them know that this is something that I own. This is something that I do. And they were gracious enough to let me implement it into the organization, which
Wow.
we had about 70 clinics that were using it. I don't know what if they still do today. I know they have quite a few that still use it. But to be able to then implement something that I've actually been a part of the creation of, and use that to drive better outcomes was even awesome. From that, though, since it's been commercialized, just the amount of data that we have gained. So we have systems in 5 countries now. We have data on over 90,000 athletes, which equates to right around 320 million data points related to human movement. What you
Incredible.
can gain from that data is just so fascinating to me, and more importantly, how do I create programming that's going to have a true measurable effect on that data? And that's what I'm really loving, because I get to dive into it every day. I get to really take a deep dive into it every day and really try to solve that problem.
Hence the name of the
Are
facility.
you using AI
Yes.
at all with that?
So, here's the thing is that, AI is great. We are applying some AI to it. But the AI tracking on your iPad, on your cell phone, and things like that is not accurate enough yet. It's still got around a 20% error rate. And you can see
Wow.
that when the skeletons go on there, and especially with human movement being the speed of movement that it moves, it's not completely there yet. It will be there someday. But we still have to rely on the wearable sensor to give us true accurate data. The AI is getting better. Like if I do a side view of someone running, I can get better accurate data. But if I have someone hopping and going multiple directions, its ability to accurately track that is still not quite there yet. But it's getting better.
Yeah, cool.
So from there, from Select and being the director of sports medicine and innovation, you had the opportunity to expand your cohort to police, to fire, to
Police and
tactical
fire,
athletes. You want to touch on that real quick?
That was an amazing experience. I got approached by a company that was a startup company, and they were just starting to do a lot of work with first responders. And those that know me know that my entire career has been driven around not making a lot of money. It's about serving a calling. And, it was right at the height of the Black Lives That Matter. I felt like I needed to do something for our firefighters and our police officers. And this opportunity came to me, and I'm like, what better way than to help police officers and firefighters stay healthy? And so the company had approached me and said, hey, we see this thing that you're doing with athletes. Does this have application to, your firefighter and your police officers and your military personnel? And I'm like, absolutely, because biomechanics is biomechanics. Doesn't matter if you're running after
Occupational athletes, right?
Right, exactly. It doesn't matter if you're running after an athlete or running down the field, or if you're running after a suspect. Your biomechanics all still matter. And so I got the opportunity over about a 3.5-year period to implement what we were doing. We had about 350 departments across the U.S. And we were implementing with departments as low as like 40 to 50 to departments of 6,000 and 7,000. So we were doing mass assessments on, 3,000 to 4,000 people at one time. It's the efficiency of your process is super important, obviously. But we were able to collect total, in my time there, we collected data on just about 8,000 first responders. And the cool thing is that, again, what you learn from that and how you can use that. We would take the data and we would push it into an app that would then auto assign based off of certain metrics that we were measuring, would automatically assign them to an exercise program. And this app that we created would allow us to track their heart rates, so they could hook their Whoop up to it. They could hook different devices up to it to track heart rates. We could track if they were compliant with the exercise program. They could put their nutrition in there. They could do a virtual visit through the app. They could film themselves doing the exercise so we could correct or connect to their routine. And then there was a lot of AI built into that would be self-motivating. Like they finish their workout, they get an email from me that says, great job. Saw you PR'd on your squats today. Fantastic. Let's take it up to the next level. So it was really a neat project, taught me a ton. And really, really gave me a greater and even greater, I had a great respect, but even a greater respect for what our first responders go through.
Well, and once again, if you'd like to learn more about Trent's information or hear him speak, he's going to be one of the 16 speakers at the SPRT Therapy Sports Movement Symposium in June 13th and 14th. If you're interested, either go to SPRT Therapy on Instagram or sprttherapy.com to learn more. Or you can reach out to us by emailing jp@sprttherapy.com. I mean, talk about being a true expert. I mean, that comes from reps and reps and reps, and the number of reps that you acquired, through the process leading up to select, through select, and then through, that opportunity with first responders. What an amazing experience. And once again, a lot of what we do is recognizing patterns.
Yeah.
And so the more individuals that we can see, the more those patterns just become clearer and clearer. And then taking that into the creation of the athlete lab. Can you talk a little bit about how, that was influenced regarding your entire experience, and then, going back into, after being an executive, being, an innovator, always treating along the way, but it's been a long time since it was full time on a regular basis. Your main focus. Talk about that transition a little bit, about the joy of, being able to put your hands on people again and work with them. And then some of the innovations that you're using on a regular basis. We know, Bobby Rossetti and Rock Cuffs and, Northeast Seminars have been a part of that. And you're really big into BFR, utilizing that on a regular basis. We know that you suffered your own knee injury, and we got you a new X, which is the AC/DC dual current technology, which really helped. And I think that you're still utilizing that technology today. But maybe talk about, once again, that transition, back into full-time practice and the creation of the athlete lab. Once again, it's a lab, right?
Yeah, it is a lab. It is a lab for a reason. I tell new clients all the time, this is a part of what you experience here is innovation. And what I promise you is that even what I did when I first opened the doors a year ago is not the same as what I'm doing today, because I'm constantly learning, and that's one of the things that I love the most. Not something that you usually do in your mid 50s is, quit a big corporate job and, go and take all of your equity and throw it down on starting a new business.
If you're smart, you do.
Right.
If you're smart,
you do it earlier, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it at the time, but that's the smart move.
Exactly. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I have had so much fun here. And quite honestly, it's a cash-based business. I know it's expensive for people to come see me. At the same time, people obviously see a value. I've got a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes who are, servers, or who, are working blue collar jobs that are still scraping up the money because they see the value of what we've created here and what we're doing here. So it's, what I tried to do here is I got my black belt on September 11th of 2023, an iconic day. My professor is a level 4 combatives instructor for special forces. So I got it by an iconic vet on an iconic day, and it was an iconic event for me.
Wow.
And
That's
what
the universe, right?
Yeah, for sure. And what I told my professor is that, what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a facility that was innovative in doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing in sports and bring it to the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu community. Because as a sport, we are still very antiquated. We are still very barbaric in some of the things that we approach. And only now are there developing courses for physical therapists and physicians on how to understand a combat athlete, how to treat a combat athlete. Matter of fact, I just saw that the American Academy has developed a SIG group specifically for the combat athlete, and they're having their first conference actually here in Nashville on the combat athlete. Because the community needs it. It's there is, for those who don't know the sport, there is no other sport that I'm aware of where you take every single joint to its in range of motion and you make it pop out of joint or they tap. And you do that not once, not twice. You do it for hours on end, and sometimes 5 to 6 days per week. And so the amount of wear and tear on the body is super important. So one of the things I was very focused on here is developing a scientific approach to recovery. So things like your cold plunge. I've got Normatec systems here. I've got class 4 laser here. I got shockwave here. I've got a red light therapy bed. It looks like a sun tanning bed that I do. And Dr. Brown, one of the things that you had mentioned is how all these systems get out of whack. One of the things I've been playing around a lot with recently, especially for my post-op ACLs, is the vagal nerve just gets overstimulated. And as we know, when that happens, it inhibits the healing process. It inhibits the ability to relax and to, get a little bit more comfortable. It disrupts your sleep. It can cause the release of certain hormones that slow the healing process. So there's a lot of really good research out about different techniques that you can do for that. And one of those is a red light bed, and the other is a stimulation of the vagal nerve. So one of the things that I do now is I have a vagal nerve reset that I do where I place 2 electrodes on the cervical spine, 2 on their feet, and then I put them in the red light bed and pass a low level current through there. And it's remarkable how people come out. Well, first of all, they typically fall right asleep. The red light bed, for most people, they'll just start to doze off like right at the very end. It's a 15-minute session. But those that I do the vagal nerve reset, they typically within the first 5 minutes, they're out. And they come out of there and they're like, wow, I just feel like a whole new person. Like I just feel amazing. So, it's some of those, one of the other things that we're doing a lot with too is BPC 157, TB500, because these are peptides that we use in this industry to really help to accelerate the healing process and all of that. And so when you combine that with BFR, one of the things I always tell people when I teach the courses in BFR is that BFR is not just about the increasing your muscle recruitment. BFR is also about the systemic effect. And quite honestly, I think the systemic effect you get from BFR plays an even more crucial role than just making your quad contract, because the growth hormone, the IGF-1, and those are the ones that myostatin suppression, those are the ones that we know about. What we don't know about is the effect that it has on testosterone, because there is some effect on testosterone. And there's the effect of when you do that and then jump into a red light therapy bed. Well, how does it work when you do BPC 157 and TB 500, do BFR, and then jump into the red light bed? Like the multiple effect of all of that is what is absolutely amazing me, because I think that when you do these different biohacks and separation, they work. And when you multiply them on top of each other, it just is to me, it's a major game changer.
It's like an entourage effect, right?
For sure.
So 1 + 1 can equal 3 if you do it right.
Yes. Yeah. And what I tell people is 1 + 1 + 1 is 80, and it's not 3 anymore. It continues to surprise me. I've got an ACL right now, ACL, PCL, LCL, and he's 7 weeks out now. But he's hitting markers that are at the 14, 16-week mark. I mean, and
I think you have him on your Insta.
I do.
I'm just going, I wanted to directly send that to the Rotolo brothers and say, hey, look, this guy's even more messed up than you, and he's blowing you up right now. So,
well, there's another really good story on there. So if anybody's interested in going on my Instagram, he is,
what's your IG? It's BJJ
PT_ACL_guy. And there's a story on there, special forces guy that I'm treating right now who suffered a gunshot wound to the lumbar spine, and it cut across his lower spinal cord, causing cauda equina syndrome. So
Oh,
he had
wow.
paralysis of his
Jeez.
left leg when he first came in, and he shares his story about the different things that we've been applying to him with the direct current, alternating current, with the BFR, with the red light therapy, with the cold plunge, and all these different things. And in the video, you see him doing a quickboard agility exercise. And the first day, he couldn't even lift his leg coming in here. So that video was done at 5 weeks post gunshot wound. So the fact that he is accelerated to the degree that he is, just says something about the different ways you leverage all these different biohacks to maximize outcomes.
So impressive. And we're going to have you back on to talk about shoulders and low backs and BFR and red light therapy. And but this year you're going to be speaking at the Sports Movement Symposium on ACL prevention and rehab. Wondering if really quick, if you could just pull up your deck and maybe we can go through a few slides that you're going to be presenting so you can kind of share a little teaser of some of the information you're going to be going into.
Yeah, Trent, too, while we're doing this, I just want to express, my solidarity with you in that we believe our athletes can always be doing something to help themselves get better in a 24-hour period. So whether it's breath work they're doing at home or visualization or the exercises, there's always a way to be stimulating the body. So I appreciate that. That's not something that we've talked about, but it certainly looks like it's this, we're brothers in arms on that approach.
For sure, and again, I mean, the more I learn, the more I realize I didn't know.
I feel you
on a daily basis.
Yeah, John, this is one of the slides that I will be presenting in the presentation, and it really, because it just highlights horrible movement dysfunction. And one of the things that I've learned is that athletes are really good at hiding their movement. But two ways to really kind of pull it out. One is to do single limb testing. So anytime, Timothy Hewitt, very well published researcher in the ACL biomechanics world, will tell you that the number one exercise or the number one movement to detect risk is a single leg squat. And so I use the single leg squat, I use a hop, a multi-directional hop. But this picture highlights why it's so important, because what you see is that there are deviations along the entire kinetic chain that leads towards this dysfunction and leads towards injury. And even looking down at the foot and the ankle and how that can be a driver for the full kinetic chain. And I think sometimes we just get so focused on one link in the chain that we forget the multitude of effect that these things have. And really what the AMI has taught me to do from a clinical perspective is start looking at, okay, so if the foot does this, what are the muscles that actually, from origin insertion, what are the muscles that actually prevent the ankle from moving in that direction? And then it allows you to really kind of reverse engineer, okay, well, if this is happening at the foot and the ankle, here's what I need to address. If this is happening at the knee, here's what I need to address. And so it allows you to really see. And the cool thing is that a lot of these lower extremity movements that we're now seeing are being published in the research as also causative factors for some of the scapular stuff and some of the shoulder stuff and some of the elbow stuff that we're seeing in Major League Baseball pitchers. They've made some deal. American Journal of Sports Medicine 2024 published a great study that showed that, a single leg squat, that if they have an unstable single leg squat, that they're going to be placing more torque and more force on the labrum of their shoulder, as well as the UCL of their elbow. So
Wow.
when you,
Real quick, Trent, you mentioned the AMI. Can you just explain that real briefly for everyone who doesn't understand?
So the AMI is a series of movements that I developed. I didn't develop them. I put them together from various tests. And I put them in a sequence that allows you to build momentum or build fatigue upon each successive test. So the tests are all done in sequence with the idea is that, the first part of the test is a plank test, a squat test, and a side plank right, side plank left. But the idea is that you're creating some level of fatigue to the legs, you're creating some level of fatigue to the core, and then I'm going to put you in a single limb activity. So you do a single leg squat, and the single leg squat, fatigue of the single leg squat adds to the hop, which then adds to the hop plant, which is jumping forwards, backwards, out, and in. And then the last one is a mobility test to really rule out lack of mobility at the foot and the ankle, lack of mobility at the knee, and lack of mobility at the hip. So by going through this sequential test, what it allows us to do is we actually place sensors on the individual, and these sensors are capturing movement within 1% of a Viacom system, and they're capturing them at 200 frames per second, so faster than the human eye, and it's capturing over 4,700 data points as you continue through this test. So the test gets more difficult as you go, it increases fatigue as you go, and gets a better functional representation, specifically on the single leg multi-directional hop, because they jump forwards, backwards, then they jump lateral, and then they jump medial. So you have a change in direction, lateral to medial, and you've got to have a huge amount of pelvic stability and center of mass stability when making those types of movements. Does that help, John?
Really helpful.
One of the other things that you had asked me, John, is, to give some highlights of some slides that have maybe been very influential for me. And I'm going to highlight this one. We'll end on this one. And that is that King, as well as Itherburn, they both published studies in the American Journal of Sports Medicine 2019. King was the first one. He looked at ACLs at 9 months post-op. Now, keeping in mind, all of these ACLs had physical therapy. They had physical therapy with a sports certified specialist, which means someone who has gone extra knowledge in sports rehab. And even at 9 months, when they looked at the 156 of these ACLs at 9 months, they still had the movement patterns that we know put them at risk. The specific movement patterns they had, one was a lateral shift. When they landed, they were shifting their weight off of their affected side still at 9 months. 9 months is that critical period because it's that return to play. And then the second thing is that when you put them on one leg, they could not maintain frontal plane control at all. And then Itherburn went a step further and looked at him 2 years. Now, at 2 years, when they loaded bilaterally, it had kind of mellowed out. It had kind of self-corrected, but single limb performance was still bad. And so when I see studies like this gives me an aha, because we know re-injury rates up to 3 years post-op ACL reconstructions are around 27%. Wow. So what this study told me is that if a majority of people are still presenting with these movement patterns, we're doing a bad job. We are supposed to be a movement profession, and we're supposed to be, changing the way that people move and improving the way that people move, but we're not there yet. And that's really quite honestly, one of the goals of the AMI is to help clinicians who may be not so good at looking at human movement be able to assess human movement with lab quality data and use that information to drive better, more informed exercise programming.
That's wonderful stuff. The real world issues that I see with that is you're either income oriented or outcome oriented, as you mentioned earlier, and so unfortunately the model has been set up to be more income oriented, less outcome oriented. So kind of up against the wall, even though you've got the science, you've got the statistics, you've got the results, it's still a difficult story because we have that same problem on kind of our side of the playing field in chiropractic, where we have the knowledge and the education to understand that, there's a reason for the spine to go out, and it isn't just isolated because the spine wants to go out of alignment. things move that spine. And if you don't focus on those things, the outcome will never be there. They'll always have to come get adjusted or get
For
treated
sure.
because you're not dealing with those end games. And especially as time goes on, if you didn't alter those habits that brought the problems to begin with, you're going to have a lifetime of problems. So,
For sure.
I'm not sure how to solve this, but I appreciate that you're moving in that direction.
Well, and I'm trying to, through creating a product that has it can bring a financial benefit to the clinic.
Yeah.
And, part of my book that I wrote was, there's one whole section in there, like, how do you market this? How do you create your practice as a niche practice, as a movement-based practice? How do you talk about it? How do you educate about it? How do you bill for it? Like all of that, to try to show people that better outcomes can have a return on investment.
Wow, that's great. And that's great information. I mean, that's really valuable information.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think really, really well said, especially as you talk about, the three-year injury rate. I think it's also a product of our conditioning of athletes and patients to not emphasize the fact that just because you've been returned to play, just because the pain is gone, doesn't mean you stop doing your stuff. Like that, those rehab exercises are for life. You need to continue those, and those are the important things that you should be focused on, as opposed to just wanting to go out and do the latest, crazy dynamic workout that you see on Instagram, or, huge Olympic lifts. It's just so important to keep with your rehab exercises and have them be a prime focus, going forward. And I think once again, we condition people to, once they return to play, you're done with your stuff.
Yeah.
You're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. And I think we need to get up better exercises that actually improve the movement, because I think for so long we just kind of just do it and don't change it.
But that's also a progressive process, kind of like a martial art, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like you can't get to some of those things until you've been consistent for 6 months to a year with some of the more foundational exercises.
Absolutely.
And most people just either it's not emphasized and not iterated enough, or they just don't understand the importance of being consistent, like doing the work every day. But it's a great point. And, once again, if you want to see, Trent speak live and in person, come to the Sports Movement Symposium in June in Newport Beach, California. If you're interested in watching some of his educational modules, I know you've got a 6 to 7 part series on Web Exercises Academy. Once again, it's webexercisesacademy.com. Check that out. That's a really great 7-part series that we just recorded not too long ago.
And Trent, too, before we jump, I've had the experience of working with Kaizen Vector, and I really like it. And I really like the couple challenges that it gives as well. Can you drop just a minute or so on what that particular device is and how it's helped you?
Yeah, so the Kaizen Vector is it's a tube with some resistant bands inside of it. The cool thing is it's low weight, very portable. A couple of things that I do a lot with it. We've created a mulligan type of technique that you can do for hip mobility that I do with a lot of my jiu-jitsu athletes to help improve internal, external rotation and just hip mobility in general, because it's a common problem in
like
jiu-jitsu
mulligan
athletes.
Snags.
So it's under tension and then motion while it's under tension. So we got a couple of those that we do. I do a lot of rotational training with it. So it's got a long strap to it. So you can strap it to the shoulder, circle it around the person. So it's pulling on their shoulder in one direction, their hip in another direction, while doing single limb activities, like the video or the picture that I showed there with the athlete in one leg, making them control all of that at the same time. So yeah,
that's great.
It's a great device. It's inexpensive and super duper effective. I've absolutely enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Matter of fact, it is probably one of the major pieces of equipment I use the most in the clinic.
That's a great piece. And again, I love it. I love it when you use dueling banjos
Yeah.
going at it with perturbation coming from a different
Absolutely.
side, and
Yeah.
all that stuff's great. And just a quick shout out to Eric K. I know he's going through some stuff right now. We just want to send him some big love. So
Big love, bro.
yeah,
Big love.
thanks, Eric, for all you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great mention, TB, to Eric K and Seth Foreman and the KZN Vector team. I know Trent, they're partially sponsoring. They're your
Yes,
sponsor
sir.
for
Yes,
the
sir.
Sports Movement Symposium. So I'm really looking forward to that and to seeing them as well. And then one of the things that we typically close with, based on what you've acquired and you've accumulated and the knowledge that you now understand, and then obviously you work with a lot of younger athletes, and so you're able to impart this to them, on a frequent, regular basis. But as you've acquired this knowledge and you think back and look back to your time, as a younger athlete, what do you wish that obviously it's usually a huge list, but at the top of your list, what do you wish that you would have had access to? How could that have altered the trajectory of your athletic career? What are some of the things that are non-negotiables as you're speaking with your younger athletes on a regular basis, just to get them to truly understand the importance of some of the things?
Yeah, I would say several things. Recovery, in most of the things around recovery. I wish that I was fortunate enough that I was exposed to proper nutrition early on in my weightlifting career. I don't know if you guys remember Bill Phillips, but I used to kind of read a lot of his stuff and did a lot of his approach to nutrition. So I would eat clean and high protein and all that. The other thing is the recovery science. I wish I had had access to cold plunges and red light therapy and Normatec compressions and all that stuff, because I think, quite honestly, I'm going to share, I'm 56 years old, and to be able to, do the things that I do at this age, especially with jiu-jitsu, and, I'm training 4 days a week, to be able to do that and maintain good health of your joints is hard, but the recovery stuff, man, if I had been exposed to that earlier in my career, I think I would probably not be feeling as many aches and pains as I do right now. I'd still have some, but not as, hopefully not as many.
And recovery, not just from an innovation perspective, but also from overtraining.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
I mean, we work with a lot of younger athletes. I mean, kids who are pitchers.
I don't overtrain.
They throw 7 days a week, and we're like, man, you just threw 70, 80 pitches in a game yesterday.
Yeah.
You got to take a day off the next day.
Sure.
Allow those adaptations to take place.
And it's easier to tell somebody to do that and do it yourself.
Yeah. Amen. Especially you.
It's like they're partying with their body. You can't party with your body 7 days a week, and that's what you're doing when you're playing sports, is you're tearing yourself up pretty good. So
absolutely.
I was just going to make a comment on what Trent was saying about overtraining. If you follow his Instagram, he's competing with Jocko Willick on a daily basis to see who got up earlier to work out.
I get up at 2:45.
2:45.
Jocko gets up at 4.
I was going to say 3:30. Oh my God.
4. So there's no competition there. I hope you're going to bed at 5 p.m. That's sorry, TB, go ahead.
I wish I was too.
Hey, no worries. So, hey, Trent, if you could choose anybody out of history to sit down and have a meal with, who would that be? Anybody.
My dad.
Beautiful.
I
thought
father,
about that today.
Yeah.
Same
thing. My father's had 2 spinal cord injuries in his lifetime, and he's still alive and kicking. And from a wheelchair, built one of the country's largest construction companies.
Oh my God.
They're now in 5 different states. They've got over 4,000 employees, and he did that from a wheelchair.
Incredible.
He is by far probably one of the biggest influences on my life.
Wow. Talk about just a stud, huh?
Yeah.
Right?
Total stud.
Wow.
For sure. And
Beautiful.
I apologize. I
sharing.
do have a patient here. So.
Oh, well, what an amazing place to end.
Right.
Trent, we've been trying to put this together for months. So thank you so much for your time. Once again, can you let them know where they can find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah. Go to BJJ PT on Instagram, BJJ PT _ACL _guy. I'm super responsive on there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on YouTube under Trent Nessler, Dr. Trent Nessler. You can see a lot of my videos, a lot of my education's on there as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope our pops get together up there and spend some time. I think they'd really enjoy each other, man.
Awesome.
Just like I enjoy you.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys so much. I can't wait to see you guys in June.
Sounds
Once
great,
again,
man.
for the SPRT Therapy Podcast, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day. Appreciate you.
Big love. Stand tall.
Thanks again for joining us for today's SPRT Therapy Podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes in coming weeks. And please check us out on Instagram and online at sprttherapy.com for upcoming events and discounts on live educational courses. Until next time, have a great day and stand tall.
I sway not in the breeze as I lay on the beach, watch the sunset undress as I wind.